So we are a small but mighty group, and there will be times when they're actually a heart of this, you're going to be talking with other people. So just so you know, some of you might need to move, or so you can have those conversations. All right, but the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get out or open up your device, if you would, and you're going to go to this Slido.com. And when you go there, you're going to enter 2252. So whatever web browser you want to use, and it's just web-based. And you should see the question of what kind of vacation do you like to take? Okay? So I'll let you get in there first, Slido.com. And then you enter, what kind of vacation do you like to take? I'm going to go ahead over to that screen so everybody can see what's going on. All right, so far we've got a lot of hybrids. You like to mix it up. 2252, right here at the side. Oh, sorry, that's a little thing for me. Microsoft, so helpful. Okay. All right, we got a lot of hybrids in this room. I'll ride any roller coaster, the thrill seeker, the adventure athlete. We've got at least one, don't bother me, I'm laying out. That says it all. So we're up to 8 votes. We got a few more in the room. I've had 9 people, so I've got 5 of you that either maybe haven't been able to get there yet. The laying out part is winning, or not winning, but it's getting bigger. Okay. All right, so I wanted you to get used to using this because we're going to use it for a couple other polls here. So you're going to see my view here for a second. And we'll go over to this one. Okay, so what most closely describes your role? So you'll need to scroll down because there's quite a few different options there. Which one most closely describes your role? Good, we're getting a snapshot of who's in the room. And the last one, there's another person, special educator. I'd say special educators are dominating. Okay, and this one, what's the most accurate statement for you? You use the UDL framework to plan your lessons every once in a while. You use the framework to plan lessons most of the time. And then the framework is ingrained in your thinking. It's how you plan every lesson. Just so you know, Slido.com, it's actually not in like an educator's grouping of apps or web-based polling programs. But because the ones that are out there for educators, like Poll Everywhere, if you need to poll a group of over 30 people, then there's a charge associated with it. And so that's why I use this one, because I never know what the size of the group is going to be. And it does essentially the same thing, and for adults, it works pretty well. But it is a free tool. It's very easy to use. It doesn't have to just be multiple choice. You can do open-ended answers. They have quite a few different ways you can use the tool. But I find it to be effective in a nice way, just so everybody gets a feel for what's going on in the room. Okay, so the majority of you use the UDL framework to plan every once in a while, and some of you use it to plan your lessons most of the time. Fabulous. Okay, so what we're going to be doing during this time is giving you the opportunity to investigate how you can use the framework to go beyond the lessons, and you're designing those inclusive environments. So we're going to be thinking more about, A, the things that you're going to do consistently in your classroom, so they become a part of your day-to-day workings. And B, we'll think about those resources that you have, what resources you have access to, and how you use those resources. And those resources can be anything from people to the things that are in your cabinets, to the technology equipment that's available, to all the programs that are available via technology. So as we think through those things, those are all included as resources. So what I'd like for you to do for a little group time, and it's about 3 to 5 people, so some of you might need to move and cluster if you would, and you're going to choose, well, first of all, you're going to introduce yourselves, name and why you like UDL, and your goal for learning about UDL. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to read guideline descriptions based on your principles. So I have up here like each of the guidelines, so all of the action and expression, the 3 guidelines are here. So somebody from your group would come up, or these are on your thumb drive, these same pieces of paper. So if you want to do this digitally, that's available to you too. Okay. So action and expression is here, and there's a little slip of paper that you'll want to pick up. And engagement, the 3 guidelines are here in a little slip of paper. And then representation and a little slip of paper. The slip of paper is just the same questions I'll have up here. You don't have to come get them if you don't want to, but some people like to have the little slip of paper. Okay, so you're going to read the guidelines based on one of the principles. You're going to just choose one principle, so either that representation, engagement, or action expression. And one of the people in your group is going to be a digital note taker. Okay, and after your little introductory time, for about 10 minutes, let you get to know each other, you're going to talk about examples of your principle that have been used in your learning environment. How have you successfully used it? And these are the questions I want you to get to, though. How do you know it was successful? What was your proof? So likely it was attached to some sort of assessment, or just kind of the student reactions, what have you, but talk about that. How did your example allow for options and flexibility? So in that example that you have, what ways can you describe the different options and flexibility that were there for your students? And then could you provide even more flexibility within that example? So as you reflect on it, and the 3 to 5 of you talk about it, could that expand even more? So those are the questions that are on this little slip of paper. Now, those are also going to go on one of these Google Docs. And I apologize, these aren't hot links. We couldn't quite figure out how to do that within the system that you have, so I made them into bit.lys, short links. And so you'll need to enter this. But somebody in your group is going to be entering the answers to those questions that I gave you. They're also on the Google Doc. So for example, if you look at action expression, then this is the bit.ly that you'll bring up, and these are L's, 2L, CL, Y, WT. Those will be collected, and I'll be able to show you how to get back to those answers. So everyone has, it's kind of a group entry of the information. So why don't I go back here first? This is what I'd like you to do first, is just go ahead and the next just find 3 to 5 people and do this little first part where you introduce yourselves and get your guideline descriptions. Choose which principle you want to focus on. So these are just Google Forms. So you can see that the question is there. Briefly describe your instruction example. So briefly describe your instruction example. Whatever you're going to talk about that's gone on in the classroom. Now, if I've got a group of administrators together, then I will come and talk with you also about ideas of how you can use this form, okay, for the activity. But this is an example of what you would type in. Okay, it's an algebra lesson, solving a linear equation, of the introduction ax plus b equals c, where a, b, and c are constant. Use different colored pencils to help the students identify a constant. That's where it stood. How do you know it was successful? Well, most of the students knew to move the constants. Some didn't. That's the crux of the conversation. How did your example allow for options and flexibility? Well, the students worked in pairs for the first few problems, and they can always ask for help. So that's, at the end of the conversation, you came up with those ideas, those 3 ideas. So that's all your putting in there. And then the last question, could you provide for more flexibility within the example? So after reading through the guidelines and talking within your groups, you decided, hey, you know what? We could use a cell phone bill to build examples and build interest. That's a little more interesting than just linear equations, and it's the same type of equation when you've got a complex cell phone bill. What kid doesn't want to know what their cell phone bill is? Unless their parents are paying for it. And building an equation wall, just all these ideas would then go in there. So I just wanted to show you that example. All three of the forms have that. So this is a time for you all to put together your ideas and add them in, and I will be able to show them up here on the screen too, and you'll be able to see the results also. Okay? So are there any clarifying questions for this part? Okay, I think everybody started. Go ahead. What I'd like for you to do, and one of the groups kind of got to this when they said, well, gosh, if we were thinking about action and expression, then we could have maybe taken this a little further. So that's what I'd like for you to do is you're going to choose another principle, another set of guidelines, and go through your discussion again, the same activity, the same lesson, but with a different principle. It'll go more quickly this time, okay? So you're just going to choose another one. So I have the feeling this group's going to go with action expression, just based on what I heard. All right? So choose another one, and this part of this activity is probably going to take us to the break, okay? So, yeah, I'll come back here in a second. So I know you guys did engagement and what? Action and expression, right? So what, is there a team, did you guys work on representation at all? Yes. All right. Would you guys mind meeting together? Because then at least you can talk about representation. They can talk about whichever one you didn't do. Okay. Perfect. You guys worked on engagement and action expression. Bingo. Okay. Then and it just works out. All right. So what I'd like for you to do is you're just going to overview what the activity was that you talked about and just hit the highlights of where it was and how you improved, how you think you could improve on that if you already taught it or in the future, whichever one. This is a way for you to have deeper conversations about the guidelines. That's the point to this, is to get you further into it so you're messing around in there and thinking more about it. And so I'm just going to give you about 10, 12 minutes to have the discussion, so you'll want to stay on point with that. But I want both groups to have the opportunity to share with one another. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so it looked like and it sounded like everyone was able to share some good ideas and build off of one another's knowledge. I have some folks in the room that are brand new to UDL, so this is quite the jump into the pool. So congratulations to you. And the rest of you, it was just really nice to hear your conversations and to hear what you're pondering. So I realize I've got a room full of people who, you get it. You get that we want to have a lot of different options. You get that we want to give our students lots of different inroads in so that they have the opportunity to learn and to be assessed. And some of you are in a position, as I was when I was a collaborative teacher, and you might be teaching with someone who doesn't see that light quite yet. And so we were having this conversation at the back table about how to help these people move, because it's a little bit of a mind shift. And I said that quite frankly, when I'm working with or talking with people like that, I focus in on the principle of engagement. I think about those affective networks. How can I help this person feel safe to try something new? Because sometimes that's part of it. How can I help in that whole recruiting interest? How do I align this with what they know? I was known to go out and be on the hunt for information that related to their subject area that then would also demonstrate how it's good for students to have lots of ways to demonstrate that they understood something. In particular, I worked with a social studies teacher that really thought multiple choice was the way to go. And so, but I was able to find some good stuff in social studies literature specific for that teaching group about how they want students to be able to explore different ways to talk about history, because we want to get kids excited about history. So let's give them a lot of ways to talk about history. And I just brought that in at a specific time that felt good. and we know, and it's rarely is it a lightning bolt, right? We don't see lightning bolts a lot of times in our classrooms, and you fast change. It's just kind of slow, and so you look for it and you observe for it. But that's why it's really important to have a community like this and make these connections of like-minded people so you can keep yourselves all going. Yay! When you're facing these things. Okay, so this sheet is, I believe you have this also electronically, I hope. And if you don't, then I can give you a connection via Google Docs, just so you would have it. It's a fillable PDF. And come to think of it, I don't know if I have, and I have hard copies of it. Yay! Okay, so the idea here is, it's really simple, obviously, but you would be thinking about whatever that item is and where it's located. So let's just call them classroom computers, okay? So you've got a classroom computer. Where is it? Well, I got one in my classroom. How I use it, thinking about the different ways that you use that classroom computer would go there. How could I use it differently? And this form is something you can use to fill out as we move through this next part. That's up to you, or if you just want to kind of keep these things in mind, that's fine, but I'll walk around with these here in a second so you have them. But what I'm going to focus on is the different learning networks. So we'll start with recognition. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background to the networks, which some of you have, some of you may not have as much. And then give you some questions to think about. So my husband and I, when we travel and go someplace outside of the U.S. specifically, we like to go on the bike tours because we see more of what's going on, and you're out in the open and all this kind of stuff. And usually there's a little historical part of it. Well, the first time we ever did this was in Germany, and they even have stoplights for bikes in Germany. You know, they have bicycle paths, and the rules are very, very strict. What you do, what you don't do, and the policemen, the Polizi, are there, and they will write tickets, you know, if you're doing the wrong thing with your bike. So you just really don't want to do the wrong thing. So we're riding along after we've gone on one of these tours, and we're feeling pretty good about this, but we come to an intersection and we see this sign, and we do not know what it means. Because, of course, in the U.S., that means don't do it, and in the U.S., this really means really don't do it. And then we see an arrow to the left, and we see an arrow to the right, and this is a T. And so all we can think of, we can't turn left, and we can't turn right. We don't know what to do. And we're a little anxious at the moment, but I said, well, we're just going to wait for other cyclists to come along. Well, other cyclists came along, and some turned left and some turned right, so we're like, okay, I guess this is all right. Well, later on, I come to find out that what this sign means is that you can't park on the left side of the road, and this one means you can't even just stop and idle your car. You can't stand your car on the right side of the road. That's what that meant. But neither one of us had that background knowledge. We had nothing from which to pull to help us understand this. However, we were both resourceful enough to say, we're just going to be patient and wait for somebody who does know what's going on so that we won't get in trouble with the Polizi. All right? So if you think about it with our students in the classroom, they're just kind of riding their bike along, and then every once in a while they run into something like this, and they don't know what to do. And when we've worked to give them skill sets and practice in figuring out their own ways to negotiate issues, then they know to watch for the bikes that are coming up. So some of the questions that you might ask related to the recognition networks when you're thinking about your classroom. What symbols are in my classroom, and what assumptions do I have around their interpretation? So we can have a very rich environment with lots of things and lots of supports on our walls, but sometimes we have to take a step back and think about what do those symbols mean and how might our students be interpreting them, especially if they're English learners or if they've got a significant language deficit. How do I want them to be used? Are they learning tools? And do I build those into my lessons? Are they just decoration? Which that's okay, but what is the purpose? So knowing that. And then of course, do I have the English language learners in my class, and what options have I explored for them? And then in what ways do I check my students' background knowledge when I introduce those new topics or ideas? So what I'm going to do is I'll walk around and pass these out and give you a few minutes to just start thinking about these questions. This is specific to symbols, but you can think about other items in your classroom in the same way. So what's on my walls? What assumptions do I make about what's on my walls? What are my classroom management? What's my classroom management design? Like, do students always turn in their homework in one place? Do they always pick up papers, late papers, what have you, in a place? And you can think through these questions and use this form to start thinking about the principle of representation in those networks, for recognition networks. And you don't have to do this independently. You can do these with a partner if you'd like. Can anybody tell me, did you see this with your stuff? Yeah. Did you find it digitally? Yeah. Okay, good. It is available digitally if you'd like. It's a fillable PDF, so you can put as many words in that PDF as you want. You won't run out of space. All right, so in this line of strategic thinking, what are the different ways your students show what they know? What tools do you have? And how do you use them? Sometimes we don't take inventory of what we've got in our classroom until we are told by school administration that they're going to paint our classrooms over the summer, and you have to pull everything out. Or those lovely times when you have to change classrooms, right? You've been told at the end of the year, well, you're switching classrooms, Loui. You're going to go from 8:20 to 8:16. Okay. So all of a sudden you find things that you're like, I forgot about that. So this is a great time to think about those items and how could you use them? Is there a way that you could use them within your assessment and tools of students showing what they know? Do you use formative assessment? And do you use formative assessment to inform your lessons? Because that's what formative assessment is all about. It is not a time to take a grade. It's a time to say, whoops, missed that point, didn't quite get that one across. There's still an ocean between me and their understanding, so I guess I got to go at this a different way, right? So how are you using that? How do you help your students monitor their movement forward? Do you have strategies around that, tools within your environment, or tools that you can embed within your environment? One of the teachers that I'm working with now, she created a wall, and I love this. I might be able to dig the picture up because she just sent it to me recently. But the students, rate themselves where they are with their understanding of something. Like, I don't know much about this. I feel, I think I know about this. I totally know about this. And when they enter into the lesson, then they say where they are. And when they exit the lesson, they say where they are. But what I love is that she took pictures of them and then shrunk them down so it's the picture of the student themselves. And they place the picture of themselves up on that. I mean, I've seen, magnets and dots and everything else, but I thought it's just really a neat way to do it, that her students link to, and they enjoy that. All right, and how do you help helping the students monitor their movement forward? This helps them see what the expectation is by the end of the class, right? Then comes the conversation of, well, Loui, if my students know they're supposed to learn and they're just telling me that they learned and they really didn't learn, that doesn't lead to anything good. So then that becomes a point of you do have to assess the skill or the topic. You have to have that going on. But it is key to have the students self-assess themselves. You might have to have conversations and plenty of opportunity for them to understand how those two things overlap. Because some of our students don't understand that overlap. But, they see that they got they got 18 out of 20 on their spelling. But they say that they don't know their spelling really well yet. Well, you need to have a conversation. Does this look like you know your spelling? Yeah. So where should you place yourself? And then the opposite, right? But that skill in and of itself, where the students monitor their movement forward, this is a life skill. This is an absolute life skill that we take into our work communities, into our relationships, self-monitoring. And then what strategic skills do your students need related to the topic? Okay, so I'm just going to give you about 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes to think through these questions and think through what's in your environment. Okay, so the last one that you would be thinking about is the affective networks. So of course the affective is where our students are having that engagement, they're connected in, stimulating their interest and their motivation. This is going to seem like a strange story to tell because it doesn't feel so incredibly academic, but when I was teaching in Lawrence Township, I drove a gray Jetta. It was the first car I ever bought with my own money. It was a little used car. I loved it. Person that owned it before me had replaced the radio with some sort of a fancy thing that I just knew how to turn it on and find the radio station. So I get up one morning and come out to my car. I lived in a little Broad Ripple area. My car sat out in my driveway. And I get in the car, and where the radio should be are wires. So I had to go through a little processing there, like why is there a hole in the front of my car? And I happened to turn around and look, and the back passenger window had been smashed in. Well, then I got really nervous, and I go around to the back because on the floor of the back seat was my attaché with 12 IEPs. And I'm thinking, oh, please, dear God, let those IEPs be in that attaché. And they were there. But my address book had been stolen. So this is back in 1994, pre-digital, I didn't have a Palm Pilot, all this kind of stuff. So that's all gone. And I'm like, why do you want my address book? But anyway, it was gone. Come to find out when the police came that it was likely a gang initiation. They had gone up and down the streets in Broad Ripple and they were stealing sound equipment out of cars that they would then sell on the black market. And they knew there was a particular gang that did this, and it was part of their initiation. Well, if I wasn't angry before, then I was really angry. And so I get to school, it's third period, which was one of my resource periods. And so this was one of the 2 times a day where some select students came in and they were with me for a period. Now, I had some students that if they weren't in a gang, then they were pretty darn close. You know, they liked to have colors. They would come in with the bandanas. We'd have to ask them to remove those and put them in their locker and all that kind of stuff. And I was so riled about this that, you know, they're joking with me. They're, Miss Lord, where's your energy? You're like always so happy. What's wrong? I said, you know, guys, I got to tell you what happened. So in front of the class, I just told them what had happened. And I didn't do anything wrong. I just left my car in my driveway, and these people stole my stuff. And it's just so aggravating, and gave them the story. And I told them, I said, this is what the police told me. They said, this is probably gang initiation. So I said, you know, some gang somewhere probably has my radio and they're hawking it, but now I've got a broken window. I had information about you guys in my car because he's your teacher. I keep up with these things. Shouldn't have left it in my car, but I did. That's a lesson learned. But anyway, at the end of that class, one of my students who wasn't particularly engaged in education at all, we were pretty lucky when he came to school. And I had tried multiple things, home visits and calls home and all sorts of stuff. But anyway, this particular student, we'll just call him Joe, comes up, and Joe was, so I taught 8th grade, and Joe was 15 and a half, and 6'2", big boy, and comes up, stands next to me, Miss Lord. I said, hi, Joe, what's going on? I just want you to know, if you ever need any help, I'm here. I said, Joe, you know what would help me the most is if we could just figure out how to get you attached to what goes on in school, because I don't want you stealing my radio someday. And I locked eyes with him at that moment. I said, I want you to steal my radio one day. Oh, Miss Lord, I'd never do that. I said, Joe, I don't know what you do, but I've got some questions. And how you act, I don't know, maybe I'm making assumptions, but I just don't want you hurting anybody else. So he left. Now, this wasn't a miracle situation. I'm not going to tell you that he started coming to school every day and he did his homework. No, but it was the beginning of something. And it was a bit of an aha moment for me because I didn't know about UDL at the time, and I didn't understand about having this level of a connection with a student because, quite frankly, that's not the level of connection I made with my students at that time. I mean, this to me was kind of going over a line. I would do home visits, all these kind of things. But anyway, finding that was all of a sudden this avenue for him to find a little bit of more purpose and meaning and connection to both school and to me. So we kind of tripped along for the rest of the year, and he made it through 8th grade, which was a big accomplishment for this particular young man. So I tell that story because we often think about engagement and representation and accident expectation, and we put it all in that real academic mode. And the point is that especially this principle of the affective networks and the principle of engagement can be so far removed from the academic. And it's just a reminder to allow that to happen. It's got to be where we're comfortable. It can't put you in an uncomfortable position because then that juju just flows and everybody's uncomfortable, right? But when you can have that, then all of a sudden purpose emerges where it wasn't before. All right. So what ways do you support your students to practice choice and decision making in your environment? So are students able, within the way you manage your environment, do they automatically know that they have to do certain things a certain way, or they're going to be making some choices around things? For example, if you guys implement PBIS in your classrooms, your students are learning about choice and decision making through that. They may not know it and you may have to emphasize it more, but they're choosing to be respectful or whatever, responsible, whatever your things are, okay? Your daily greeting, the tone of your classroom, that's a part of your environment because you make that. How does that show up? Do you post and review your lesson goal? That's a part of your environment. And do you review it so students know what's coming? How do you support the collaboration in your classroom? And how do you support coping skills? So I just want you to think through these 5 things just for again, another 2 or 3 minutes. Get some things jotted down for yourself. And then we're going to move into a little bit of Q&A, and I have one last thing to show you. All right? So one last piece. You've all seen at least 2 of these frames, if not the third one, and it's talking about this particular slide, so, you know, equality versus equity. If we look at the first 2, right, to give access, we're allowing this student to stand on 2 boxes and this student to stand on a box so they can see the baseball game. But ultimately what we're going for is a design where we don't have to retrofit, but the design is there from the beginning, so that we know that no matter who the student is, where they are with their learning needs and their experiences, that they can access it. And this is a beautiful image and a beautiful way to think about it when we think about accessibility. But quite frankly, sometimes this is about as far as we are at the moment. And this is what accessibility looks like: 6 holes drilled into a fence so that the dogs can see out. And I want to send the message that it's okay. Where you start is where you start with accessibility, and thinking about designing something so that all your students can walk in and have access to learning within your learning environment. And it's just changing 1 or 2 things over time so they can get used to that. Do you guys have any questions? We were told to allow time for Q&A because apparently last year, like, things went to the very end and there were people who had questions. So are there questions or thoughts or ponderings that you have that you'd like to share?